So good morning, I'm Danae Wolf with the Learning and Organizational Development Unit. We have Rachel Leggett on the call as well with Studio 149 out of Delaware County Extension Office. Today, we're doing our editing workshop. So we're focusing on Adobe Premiere Rush here this morning, and then this afternoon, Rachel will lead our session on Adobe Premiere Pro. So if you can use the raise your hand feature, or feel free to unmute yourself, or just raise your hand if your video feed is on, or type into the chat. How many of you have ever used Adobe Premiere Rush before? I don't see any hands going up. Jared's hand went up. Just the tutorial, Wendy. Okay. So a lot of newbies here, so this is wonderful. I see some no's coming in as well. This is meant to provide a basic introduction. The great thing about a program like Premiere Rush is you can't really break it. So downloading it on your computer, and in order to download it, you do have to go through you should be able to either go through the portal manager on your computer, or you can just go to IT and submit the ticket to access Creative Cloud. You'll basically access all of Adobe Creative Cloud, and then from there you can download certain applications. So Premiere Pro is an application that exists on both desktop, and I will be showing you the desktop version here this morning, but they also have a mobile application, which is really great because one of the benefits of using the mobile app is you can take a bunch of film footage from your phone, pull it into the Premiere Rush app on your phone, and as long as you have a little checkbox marked to upload it to the cloud or to save it to the cloud, you can just transfer that entire project to your desktop, where you have a little bit bigger of an interface, a little bit more editing capability. In my opinion, it's way more intuitive to do video editing on a computer than it is on your phone. Now, if you're just doing some like really basic stuff, like you shot a few clips and you want to throw on a title and throw in like a sound clip or like audio clip, you can do that from your mobile device. But once we start working with like the CFAES intro and outro for branding, you're probably going to want to take that project to your computer. And it's so easy to do that with Premiere Rush. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my Premiere Rush interface. If you do have specific questions about accessing Creative Cloud, we can swing back to that at the end of this session. I think we'll have plenty of time, and that way we won't have to worry about people not having access to that. So you should all be seeing my Premiere Rush home screen. If you've never used Premiere Rush before, when you download it onto your computer for the first time, you're probably going to have a bunch of stock video footage in there that you can play around with. I would encourage you to use that stock footage just to play around with it. It's there for you to do that. I've deleted all of that stock footage out of my account because it was just kind of a nuisance, I felt. So this is sort of your home screen. Right now I have no projects. I've deleted all the projects out of my account. So there's nothing here. And we're going to start by hitting this Create New Project button. And I should mention, if you have any questions or you want me to do something again, please don't hesitate. I did just pull up the chat. So I have the chat window open, and I will be trying to pay attention to that. And if I miss anything, LOD folks, if you could just feed me questions as we go, that would be wonderful too. So I went this morning, I was looking through some of my own video footage that I had, trying to piece together video clips that would make like a little nice short video, and I couldn't find anything that really made sense because a lot of the footage that I have is for like longer documentary style footage. So I went to pexels.com, and I will type this into the chat because I did want to mention just a few quick words that we had this whole boot camp all week about how to get great video footage, whether with a big camera or whether with your mobile device. But there's also a lot of free stock footage available online under the Creative Commons 0 license or CC0 license, which means that you can access it for free, you can modify it, you can edit it. You don't have to provide attribution to the photographer. They always say like, it's nice if you do, but you don't have to, it's not required. So all of the footage that I'm going to be using here this morning was stuff that I went and downloaded in 5 minutes earlier this morning, just to kind of show you a cohesive clip that you can create. And it's all about oranges, which has nothing to do with crops that we would grow here in Ohio, which may or may not be a good thing. But maybe if you're creating like a healthy video, like how to get kids to eat healthy, you might be able to create a video like this. I'm going to go ahead and make my screen a little bit smaller because it's hard to see all of you, plus the chat, plus my interface. So once you click that Create a Project button, it'll open up an interface for you to search your computer for video files, for photos, for audio clips. So you can search your desktop, documents, downloads, just like you would with any sort of other browser. There's also some sample media in here. So if you click that, that's all that sample footage that I think I deleted that project out of my account, but you could also pull that in and just play around with it. So I'm gonna go back to that oranges file on my desktop. Now, as you select these video clips, they'll pop up with a number here. And this is the order in which those clips will be added to your timeline. And I'll show you what that timeline looks like in just a second. The reason why this is important is because, number one, it creates less time for you on the back end of having to go and reorder all of your files. With only 5 clips, it's not too time consuming to reorder. But the other thing that I noticed is some of these video footage, I think these 2 of the oranges and like the orange grove, I think these were shot in 4K. When I pulled these into my timeline at the very beginning, it basically thought that the project was all in 4K. So these other footage of the mom and the daughter eating an orange in the kitchen are not 4K. Those were shot in, I believe, 1080. So they actually pulled in much smaller, and they had a big black border around it. So if you have video footage that you know was shot in different resolution, try to make sure that whatever is being pulled into your timeline first is the resolution that you want the entire clip to be in, because then these clips of the oranges automatically got added in at basically downsized. So they filled the frame, but there was no weird black border around the other clips. I hope that makes sense. Just sort of a tip that I was like, wait, what happened to all of my footage? I'm also gonna pull in, actually, I'll wait to pull in my music clip. I downloaded a music clip this morning too that I will pull in. I will add this later because I don't want it playing over me as I'm speaking this whole time. So once you pull in, or once you select all of these different clips, you can go ahead and hit create in the lower right-hand corner. And this is going to open up sort of the editing interface of Premiere Rush. And depending on your computer, this may be a little bit slow. I have a pretty powerful computer, so I'm hoping this comes across okay on Zoom. Sometimes if you're working with especially really, really large footage, really large video files, your computer will really start to, like my computer starts to sound like it's going to launch into outer space because the fans start running really, really loudly, and things start to get a little bit laggy. So right now I have these 5 video clips in my timeline. I'm going to start by showing you just the basic user interface of Premiere Rush before we jump into actual editing here. So I see a couple questions coming into the chat. If you place something of the appropriate size first to set the stage, can you edit it out later to start with what you want? Yep, absolutely. So I actually don't want this clip in the beginning. I want this clip in the beginning, and you see how easy that was just to move it. I'll dive in a little bit to show how you do the editing in your timeline too. So Debbie asked, does Pexels offer free audio and music clips? So that's a great question. I did start to curate some resources on the website. I can't remember, I deleted them, but I started to develop out like a curated list of like best stock like video footage and photos and music. Most of the music resources that I use are not Creative Commons Zero. They are free to download, but you do have to provide attribution. You might be able to find CC0 licensed music, but it's probably not going to be great quality. So I use a source called, and I'm typing this into the chat, one of my favorites is Bend Sound for music. I also use Audio Technica, and they're, Audio Technica is not it, it's Audionautics. Ignore that one that I just put in there. And Rachel, you may have some other ideas too for like music that you use for some of your videos.
Yes, I use the YouTube audio library sometimes. There's a big range on that, and they're also all available on YouTube. Like, sorry, they're all usable on YouTube. So YouTube isn't going to flag your video and take it down because they've already approved those songs.
Yeah. And that does happen. I have had stuff flagged before, even where I'm like pulling it for free. I've had stuff flagged before that I have pulled from my iPhone, like some of these stock audio clips that are available in like iMovie, for example, on your iPhone. I've uploaded that to YouTube or Facebook and it's gotten flagged and removed. And you can petition that, like you can say, no, I have permission to use this, in which case, like if they agree, then your video will be put back online. Diana said, I'm already thinking this is better than Spark for a longer video as a source file. Diana, yeah, it kind of depends on what your intent is. It kind of depends on how you're using Spark, but I will say that Premiere Rush, you have way more capability to actually edit stuff in Premiere Rush, and it's still a very simple user interface. With Spark, you're really, really limited into what you can do. They sort of give you these templates and you can't really change the template at all. And that's why I personally don't like using Spark, because I find it, as I say, infuriatingly simple. And it's meant to be simple. It's meant to just push out stuff really quickly, but Premiere Rush is going to be so much better for like added capability. And then Premiere Pro is like way more editing capability once you start to get into like really high level stuff. Now, Kelly asked, is this better than iMovie? I would say it's pretty similar to iMovie. And I work on a Mac personally. I used to use iMovie a lot when I was just getting into video editing, and then I switched to Premiere Pro. Coming back to Premiere Rush, I think you have some additional capability in Premiere Rush that iMovie doesn't have, so I kind of like it a little bit more. But yeah, it's fairly similar in terms of its capability. So is there a size limit with Rush? I don't think there's a size limit with Rush, no. No, I mean, if you're doing like a really long project, like let's say you're creating like a feature length documentary film that you know is going to be probably like an hour or more, I probably wouldn't use a program like Rush. I'd probably move that project to Pro and take the time to learn how to use Pro, but it's not like you're only limited to like a 10-minute video. So keep those questions coming in. I'll try to continue to answer those. So let's talk a little bit about the interface here, starting with the upper left-hand corner. So this is your home button. If you click your home button, it'll just take you back to where all of your projects are stored. And notice how I didn't have to do anything to save this project, and it's automatically in here. So all of your projects will be stored in the home, in your home. I like to call it like the portfolio, because it's basically your portfolio of projects. We are right now in the editing interface. Notice how there's a little underline under edit. There's also a share button here. This is what you would use after you're completely done with your video project and you're ready to export it. You can either save it on your computer or you can upload it directly to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and then Behance is another Adobe product. I'm not actually sure what Behance does. Rachel, do you know Behance? Okay. Amy, do you know? I saw you unmuted.
It's like a graphic design portfolio kind of. So
okay.
It's more of a professional portfolio site.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Once you get the Creative Cloud application on your computer and you actually open that up and start to install different Adobe products, you'll notice there are like way more Adobe products than you probably even realize. And most of them I've never even heard of before. But there's Lightroom, there's Photoshop, there's, what's the audio one? There's an audio one that allows you Adobe Audition, which allows you to edit audio, which is great if you're doing anything with like podcasts. It's like a whole, God, our Adobe license is like one of my favorite things about being an OSU employee, because you have like access to so much. I like working for OSU for more reasons than my access to Adobe Creative Cloud. I should mention that. So let's go back to our edit interface. And I'm gonna move my Zoom interface around here so I can see. So this is your sort of primary editing window over here on the upper right-hand side. So you can add titles. And one of the things I love about Premiere Rush is if you hover over any of these things, it'll tell you exactly what that panel does. So if you open up your titles panel, it'll open up a whole bunch of different titles that you can add to your video. Once you add something to your video, then another little button over here will open called Edit. So if I just drag and drop this title over here, now I can go into Edit and pull that down, and I can change the font, I can change the color. You can also just, like, you should be able to just grab that and move it anywhere on your screen. There we go. So you can move that anywhere. So you have a lot of different like editing capability. Keyboard shortcuts also work. So I'm gonna just hit the delete key. This is highlighted on my computer. I'm gonna go ahead and just hit delete, and it should disappear. It's a little bit slow here this morning, but it'll just disappear. The next little panel over here is the transitions. You don't have a ton of capabilities with transitions, which is actually probably a good thing, because if you're working with transitions, the simpler, the better. You have a simple cross dissolve, a dip to black, or a dip to white. This is what you would use. You can use it in between video clips. So if I wanted to do a cross dissolve like between these two video clips, when I play this, instead of just having a very hard transition, it's going to just dissolve. And that's kind of a nice, I don't know if that's coming across super well over Zoom, because this is a pretty, it's taking up a lot of memory on my computer. Did you see that okay? So it just kind of cross dissolved. And if you wanted to delete that, you would just highlight that in your timeline and click delete. Again, I'm going to dig into the timeline a little bit better so it'll make more sense, but I wanted to just show what transitions you have. You can also use transitions on things like titles. So rather than just having a title appear and disappear, you could have it dissolve in and dissolve out, which is a nice thing. You could also dip to black or dip to white there. We do have color editing capability. So we talked a little bit yesterday about things like color grading. You have the capability of adding one of these presets. So if you highlight a clip in your timeline and you wanted to make that cinematic, I don't think this looks very cinematic, so I would not choose that, but you do have a couple presets in here that you can select that just add certain like feels and sort of certain emotions to your video clip. You can also make it like black and white if you wanted to. I'm going to leave that at none for now. If you go into the edit panel here, you can increase or decrease a lot of different things. So exposure, contrast, you can make highlights a little bit lower. You can bring up shadows if you have shadows. You can also change like the entire temperature, tint, vibrance. So you have a ton of different color editing. So if you went out and you got some video footage, whether it's on a mobile device or like an SLR or mirrorless camera, and you were like, oh man, this is really too dark, this is really too light. Typically you can bring some of that stuff up. You can color correct and do some exposure correction in post. You're going to have way more capability in a program like Premiere Pro, but Rush does have quite a few things that you can do in terms of corrections. So Diana asked, is there per slide? Is there a max video clip length? No. So Diana, this is very different than Adobe Spark in that you're not dealing with slides. You're just dealing with video clips in your timeline. So there's no, like you don't max out after a certain time with like Adobe Spark, I think it's the 30 seconds, right? So if you had like a 1 minute clip, you would have to split that into two 30-second slides. This is very, very different than Spark. So everything you know about video, because this is really very, very different. Way more capability here and just flexibility to do more advanced stuff. So yeah, you have a couple other things too. You have some like vignetting. I know some people love vignetting. This is pretty subtle actually. I've seen, I don't know, I've seen some programs that allow you to do vignetting that looks pretty garish. And here it's kind of subtle. I usually don't do vignetting. You can also do sort of feathering, which I don't see this doing a whole lot when I move that. So does the color correction only apply to the highlighted clip? Yes, Ben. And this is actually a really great thing to keep in mind because let's say you have, like, let's say you do an interview and it's like a 30-minute interview, but you know you're going to be like cutting that up into much smaller pieces. It's probably best to go in, highlight that whole like 30-minute clip, do your color corrections, and then start to split it. Otherwise, you're going to have to go in and do color correction on each one of those individually. Premiere Pro, Rachel, do you know, is there like, can you just apply certain corrections to like a bunch of different clips all at once?
You can copy and paste the settings that you've put for one clip to all of them, or you can create what's called an adjustment layer, which is just like a new blank video file that you put on top of all of your other video files. You copy and paste that coloring on top of that video file, and then everything underneath it will be colored.
So that makes a lot of sense. And I don't know that you have that ability in Rush. So I would, yeah, as a best practice, what I would do is make sure that I'm doing the color correction ahead of time, especially if it was just like correcting. Like, let's say I went out and I shot with like a really wrong white balance and like everything looks blue or everything looks yellow. Correcting that whole clip before you start to split it up and do a lot of editing would be a good thing to keep in mind. So on text settings, can you select Proxima Nova and brand colors? Yeah, so because this is an Adobe product, we do have Proxima Nova in the Adobe fonts, and you can go in and change the fonts as well. So I'll talk a little bit about how to add like title cards and how to, like if you want to move your video clip to one side and then have like a sort of a blank color or solid background and then add text on top of that. I'll show you how to do that too. And it's pretty easy. All right, so there's your color corrections. The next thing is speed. So we talked quite a bit earlier in the week about B-roll footage and shooting in, let's say, 60 frames per second. So you could slow down that footage at 50% speed in post. So this is where you would do that. You would select that clip and notice how it's highlighted orange. And there's two little clocks around just that clip that I have selected in my timeline. And then from here, you could change the speed. And notice how that clip is getting much longer because I've changed the speed. I don't know that any of this stuff was shot in 60 frames per second. I think I'm doing everything in either 24 or 30. Again, this was stock footage that I downloaded. So if I were to slow this way down and then play it, it looks really choppy. Like it doesn't look good because it wasn't meant to be shown at 23% speed. If you make a bunch of changes to anything, whether this is color correction or you do a bunch of stuff in like rotation, which we'll talk about here in a second, there is this little reset to default arrow that you can click. So if I just click that, it's going to reset everything back to where it was originally. And that's a really good thing to keep in mind. We do have some audio things that we can do as well. So right now, none of these clips have any audio, but if it were, let's say, an interview that I had done, maybe there was somebody talking, this is where you would change that volume. So some of the work that I've done in the past, I might have somebody talking and then I might play like a really soft audio clip, like a music clip underneath it. You would maybe select that audio clip and then you would turn it way down so that you would just hear it a little bit in the background, but it wouldn't be overpowering to the interview voice that you were hearing speak. You can also, there's a couple other things that you can do here under advanced settings. We're not going to get too far into that because I don't have a ton to show you with audio here this morning, but if you are going to do stuff with audio, I would suggest looking into that. Way, way, way more capability for audio editing in Premiere Pro than in Premiere Rush. So that's a really good thing to keep in mind too. So Ashley asked, do we have to activate Proxima Nova in cloud settings for it to appear? I don't recall having to activate anything, Ashley. It was just in my list of Adobe fonts. I don't know if anybody else has experience with that, but I don't think I had to do anything. So the last little tab over here in this menu that I wanted to show you is the crop and rotate. And this is something that you might be using quite a bit. The reason for that is you could, for example, if you were doing like a cooking demonstration and you wanted video footage of you showing what to do on one side of the screen, you could actually move yourself to one side of the screen, and I'll show you. So right now I have, let's say, this video footage of the mom and daughter peeling an orange on one side, and I want to change the horizontal position. So I want to move this all the way over here. Now I've just placed them completely off screen. So that might not be the best thing to do, but you could also crop. So before I do that, let's say I want to crop the right-hand side. So you could do that. And then here on this side, you would actually add a title card. It's like just a blank background. You don't even have to do that. You could have that title play directly over top the video and it would go in your timeline over top of it. So your video would still be playing behind it. Now, if you did have an example of, let me choose another video clip that might make more sense. Let's say for whatever reason, with this clip, you wanted to pull this to over here. I probably wouldn't do that just because they're looking this way and I would want to maintain that flow, so I'd prefer to have them on the other side of my screen, but if you wanted to, you could move them. You could also have two clips playing simultaneously, which might be a lot to process mentally, but you could have like two clips playing simultaneously. We were just talking earlier about that ballet, right? And how they had multiple video feeds kind of playing at the same time. So let's say you wanted to create some sort of video where everybody is saying the same thing all at once. You could pull all of those little video feeds onto your scene, and then you would just move them around. So like one's playing in one quadrant, another is playing in another quadrant, and then you would have like 4 video feeds. The thing to keep in mind with Premiere Rush, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is you only have 4 video tracks that you can play with. With a Premiere Pro, you have a lot more, and you only have 3 audio tracks. So if you had like, let's say you wanted to do a quadrant of like 9 people, like all sort of playing at the same time, and all of those video clips were separate, you would actually have to probably edit that in a program like Premiere Pro, because you can only do 4 at a time in Premiere Rush. So I see some questions coming in. When you get a chance, walking through, yes, I will walk through that after kind of we go through the timeline here. So I'll kind of show you how to add the titles. I'll show you how to add like a title card with, maybe you're doing like a recipe that you want to show. Does this allow picture in picture? Yes. So Wendy, that's exactly how you would do that. So let's say I wanted to do a picture in picture here. let's say I wanted this, and again, this is a really bad example, but let's say I wanted this to be a picture-in-picture. I would select this video clip over top of this one, and I would make it much smaller. And then you could actually just select it and like move it down here. And now both of these clips are going to play at the same time when I play that video. So again, this is sort of a terrible example of where you would use that. A better example would be, I mean, if you're thinking like a newscast or something, right? Where you have like the person who's giving the newscast, and like up here they have like the headlines sort of rolling in another part of the screen. So that's where you would do that. Yep. And again, keyboard shortcuts work. So I'm going to hit Command Z a bunch, and it's going to undo everything that I just did there. So you also have some other capabilities here. Like if you wanted to, you can do like rotation. And again, this gets really weird. And I can't think of like super great examples of where you might want to like rotate a video, but you do have that option. You also have the option of like changing the opacity. In this case, it's getting darker because the background is black. And scale, we talked a little bit about crop, so you could, crop some of the video out as well. So yeah, so that is the crop and rotate feature. Any questions about basic editing? We will come back to some of these things, and I'll show you how to do some of this stuff in like a practical way. But I also wanted to show, I have to move my Zoom screens around so I can actually see what I'm looking at here. I wanted to show your timeline. So the timeline part is the most important part of your video project. This is where you are primarily working on your video. So notice how when I created my project and I selected all of those clips, they all got pulled into my timeline. They got pulled into the video track 1. So I mentioned you have 4 video tracks and you have 3 audio tracks. You're not seeing any of those tracks show up here. You do have to click the lower left-hand button, that's the control tracks toggle. And if you click that, all of a sudden now you can see, here's my main video track, and then I have 3 additional tracks that I can layer stuff on top of. So let's say I wanted to throw the CFAES logo on top of one of these things. I would just pull in that file and I would throw it on top. Because it's on top of it, it's going to show first. So as I showed earlier, if I wanted to show like a clip on top of this, I would just pull it on top of that track, and now it's going to cut to that orange. And when the orange scene is over, it's going to cut back to that track. So that's not a practical use of that, but what might be a practical use of that? If you're doing an interview with somebody and you have sort of a talking head, and then you want to show some B-roll footage that kind of cuts in to show what that person is talking about. So Rachel did a great job explaining the importance of B-roll, and you have somebody interviewing, they're talking about like soil testing, for example. This is where like that B-roll footage of like the soil probe and like the soil probe going into the soil and coming out with like the soil falling out, or putting it into a bucket, for example. You would just layer those clips on top of the interview and they would play, and then it would just cut back to the interview. It's a really great way of, instead of having to splice your clips up and like splice your interview, split the clip, add B-roll footage, come back to your interview, you just layer it on top. So it's just a lot easier to do that. Is it possible to do basic editing layout in Rush and then move it to Premiere Pro to do, oh man, that's a loaded question. Is it possible? Probably. Is it, would I recommend it? No. And Rachel, you might have more to say.
I don't know about the compatibility of it. That's
Yeah,
the thing about
file
Adobe
types.
products, is a lot of times they work really well together. I don't know about these two working well together, but I guess I'd say you could probably create your video here, export your video, and then upload it to Premiere if you wanted to maybe color correct it in Premiere. You won't be able to really change your timeline that much. You'd have to recut and everything. So it would only be with certain things, but that might be an option.
Right. Yeah. So as Rachel mentioned, it's not like you're going to be able to like export your timeline where all of your individual like video and audio clips and stuff pull into Premiere Pro for easy editing. It's going to like basically create one video file, and you're going to pull that into your timeline, and it's going to be one clip, like your whole video. But yeah, that would be a great use of it, is like going in and doing like additional color correcting or more advanced editing. So what else did I want to show you here? talking about layers. Oh, so audio tracks are the same thing. If any of these audio, like if these video clips had an audio track associated with them, so if it was like a person talking, there would be an audio track that would show up here. This other little toggle switch that says expand audio would expand that audio clip. So actually these two clips are showing that there was audio. Let's say I did not want that audio clip playing. So if you're collecting a whole bunch of B-roll footage from, let's say, your county fair, and there's a ton of like people talking and noise, but you're just using it as B-roll, you don't want the audio, you could, maybe, you should be able to just detach the audio here, but I don't see this working, which leads me to believe that maybe there's not audio. All right, let's come back to that because I don't see this working for me. You should be able just to split audio there, and then you would delete that audio track so it wouldn't have to play. So if you film a video, oh, did that answer your question? Are those files automatically upload separately to Rush? Oh yeah, so Wendy, your audio track would be connected to your video track unless you were using like, you know, a separate microphone. Like some people record audio like separately on a separate device for better audio quality, and they would have to come in and actually match that audio track to the video track. That can get a little bit tricky. And if you're really doing that, you probably might want to do that in Premiere Pro. But if you wanted to just edit that audio track, you would be able to pull that in as you could separate it, and then you would have some editing capability, or you just delete it altogether. So again, I'm not sure. I thought you just right-clicked and deleted it, but that's not showing anything for me. So your audio tracks would live down here. So when I pull in my final music clip that I want to show you, that's going to live on this audio track 1. Your audio files all play simultaneously. So unlike when you pull in a video file and you layer a video file on top, like on the next track, so if you were on track 2 is going to play over top of track 1. With audio, it all just sort of plays together at the same time, which can get really messy, which is why you have to be aware that if you are showing somebody talking and you're bringing in a music clip, you're probably going to want to make that music clip really quiet so it just plays in the background and not over top of your person talking. So Ben said I right-clicked my clip and it allowed me to detach my audio. Yeah, my right-click for some reason is not actually working. So typically you would just right-click on that, and then you have a little menu that comes down, and detach audio is one, and then it creates a whole separate audio clip that you can then just delete if you want to. You can also just mute it. So there is a little mute button here, and notice how when I mute it, it goes gray. So those two clips are now gray instead of like this dark blue color. The other thing that you can do here, so this blue line here is called your playhead. And notice how if I'm scrolling through my timeline, I'm showing all of the video clips and how they would play. If you wanted to, let's say, split a clip, let's say, you know, I don't need this piece, or I want to split it here and pull in another clip in the middle of it and then come back to this clip, you would just hover over where you wanted that to split that clip and then hit the little scissors icon, and this now creates two separate clips. So I could move this, let's say, after this one, and it's as easy as that. So that is how you split a clip. The other thing that you can do is duplicate the clip. So if you hit the plus button, it's going to create a whole second clip out of that. And if you have your clip highlighted and hit the trash can, it will just delete that. What if we have the audio from one clip continue over to several clips? So you could do a voiceover. So in that case, you would want to detach the audio, Jenny, and you would split your clip, your video clip. So you detach the audio, split your video clip where you wanted it, and then your audio track would continue, but you might have like another video clip playing, and then your audio continues. But typically, if you're doing like a voiceover, you're more than likely going to use the video tracks where you have like your interview, like if you're talking to somebody, like you're interviewing somebody, they're talking, and then you just pull this clip over top of it, so it cuts to the B-roll footage, but your person in the background is still talking because the audio attached is under here, so your audio is still playing. So is that an undo arrow in the top right? Yes, that's an undo arrow in the top right. Yeah. And again, keyboard shortcuts work. So I'm using Command Z on my Mac, Control Z if you're on a PC. Those all work as well. So that is like the basic introduction to your user interface. This, of course, is like what you're actually seeing. So you can play your video here. I'm using the keyboard shortcut, the spacebar. So if you hit the spacebar, it'll start playing your video. And if you hit it again, it'll stop. It's just a really I tend to use keyboard shortcuts a lot, and sometimes I forget that people are like, how are you doing that? Like, I didn't see you click anything, but like the video is playing. You can also just step backward, like individual frames. So if you're trying to do like really, really nitty gritty editing and you want to make sure that you're like splicing a clip like right between 2 frames, that is how you could go in and do that by frame. You can go to a previous edit point. So that goes to the beginning of the clip. You also have the option of changing some of the aspect ratio. So you don't have a ton of options here, but if you click this button right under the video, you can change this to portrait. We generally don't recommend portrait view because now you have these black borders on the top and the bottom. You can also do square. And when you do square, it's cropping out a good portion of your video clip here. But if you were going to post this, let's say on Instagram, which tends to love square photos and square videos, that would be an option for you too. And again, that's the orientation of your entire video. So that's not just that single clip that you're editing, it's the entire like timeline and like the output of your video. So I'm going to change that back to landscape. You can also go full screen with this. So once you have like your entire video put together and you want to take like a really good look at it, you can go full screen and view that video. And then this does a loop playback. So I think it just plays it again once it's over. Any questions about like the general interface before we kind of dive into some editing?
Hey, Janae, a while back we did have a question about how to download Adobe Creative Suite. I didn't know if you were going to have time to talk about that briefly, or if we already covered that in one of our other meetings.
We did cover it in one of the meetings a couple of weeks ago. We talked about Creative Cloud, and that was recorded and posted, but I'll try and leave a few minutes here and we'll kind of walk you through the interface of how to like go through IT and request that.
Right, and I'll go ahead and post that video because I think I just found it. Thank you.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you, Debbie. So can you set it up to run a speaker besides, yep. So we'll talk about that too, Lisa. So that is where you start to work with your crop and rotate feature, where you can actually move your speaker to one side and then you can like bring up a slide and talk about something else. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that. All right, so here's my timeline. I know that I want these oranges to play at the very beginning, and then I want to cut into the kitchen showing the mom and the daughter peeling and eating an orange. So if you want to move stuff around your timeline, you literally just click it and drag and drop. So I'm going to click this other orange and I'm going to pull that to the beginning of my timeline. If you want to make a clip smaller, so this orange clip right here is a little bit longer than I would like it to be. It's about 5 seconds, and maybe I only want it to be like 3 seconds. If you have it highlighted orange, so I've clicked it, it's highlighted in an orange border, and you hover over one side or the other side, you see a little like editing arrow, and you can just drag this in, and it's going to edit that clip down. So editing your clips is actually really, really easy to do, or I should say clipping your clips, because it's just clipping. If you know that you wanted to like, let's make this, and notice how my audio is actually getting clipped too. I want to delete that, but it won't let me for whatever reason. If I wanted to just split this clip in half, I could split it and then I could delete this. But now if I highlight this and pull it back, it's actually giving me the entire clip back. So even when you split the clip and delete part of it, it's never really gone forever. It's not like you have to go and like re-upload that clip back into your timeline. It's still there. So it's just kind of two different ways of editing. And you know, one might be more intuitive for you to use over another. So again, if I wanted to make like this clip a little bit smaller, I would just hover over it and then I would just drag and drop. And it kind of shows you where you're coming into. So maybe I want that whole, like her taking the orange and pulling it to herself, her other hand. I want that to just be edited out. So I just pull that clip and clip it a little bit. It also shows you the entire length of the video. So I think right now this is 35 seconds for the entire, yeah. And then this number over here is where your playhead is in your timeline. This second number is the length of your entire video with all of the clips put together. So any questions about just like the simple like pulling and editing? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So now let's say I wanted to, let's say this was like a recipe, something to do with oranges, right? Because that makes sense, we're working with oranges. And I wanted to pull in like a recipe card that kind of showed, here's the recipe. So here's where I would go into my title panel over on the upper right-hand side, and I might scroll all the way down. There is one that's just a solid background. So I'm going to drag and drop this where I want it in my timeline. Again, just like you can clip one of your clips to either be longer or shorter, I can pull this however long I want this graphic card to be. I might want it to show like the entire length of this. Now, right now it is covering the entire video clip, and that's not good because I still want that video of the mom and daughter. So I have it highlighted. I'm gonna go down to the crop and rotate, and then I can change the horizontal picture to one side or another. So this is where now half the daughter's face is covered, and maybe I don't want that. So now I'm going to select the video clip underneath, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to move it over just a little bit so you get the full, and maybe even just a little bit more so you can see the daughter's face in there. But now I have this nice card to work from, and you should just be able to also click this, if you highlight it, click this, and then move it around in here too. So you don't have to just work with the editing window over here. You should be able to just pull that wherever you want it physically in your editing window. So now how do you add text over them? I'm gonna just make it a little bit smaller. So if you wanted to add text over that, you would go back to your title panel, and then you could pull in, I'm just gonna do a basic title here. I'm gonna drag and drop this in. The title is gonna go, and I don't know why that just did that, because I just replaced that. I'm actually gonna pull this over top of the title card that I just created. And for whatever reason, this just messed up everything that I just created. Give it a second because I think it's just processing. I see questions coming in. Oh, thank you, Debbie, for putting that in the chat. All right, I'm not sure exactly what just happened. It just replaced my title. So I actually dragged that title over top of my other title card, and it just replaced it. So if that happens, just undo, undo, undo until you need to. I'm gonna pull that title, instead of pulling it over this graphic, I'm gonna pull it over in the third video track. So now it's going to add on top. Right now it's gonna add directly to the center. I don't want it in the center, I actually want it over here. But it's white text, so it's very difficult to see. So instead I'm gonna hit edit right now, and then I'm going to go to color fill, and let's say we want it to be scarlet. That is not scarlet. I typed in the wrong number. We want that to be scarlet. So now I can pull it back over here, and you should have a couple options to make that smaller. So right now it's kind of big. You can change the sizing of it, and let's say you were going to do like a recipe for something. I'm going to make this text even smaller, and then you would type in like your ingredient list here. That's not how you spell ingredients. Wow. So yeah, so this is kind of how you would add that title card, and then, you know, this would play. I would expand this all the way out. So now this is just going to kind of play on the side. Should play, give it a second. So now you might have like, here's the recipe for this. Now, one thing that you will notice here, you might be seeing it on your screen, the text actually appears somewhat fuzzy. I don't have an answer for why that's happening. So if your playhead is just stopped over that, it looks nice and clear, but if you actually start to play that video clip, it gets really fuzzy. I don't know if that retains its fuzziness upon export. I would hope not. If you have issues with that, let me know, because we'll want to explore that a little bit further. But I've noticed that anytime I add like text over stuff, it just looks fuzzy the second I start to like edit or move that around. But that is how you would do that. And again, if you wanted this to only be, let's say, part of this clip, remember how we moved that video clip. So if we want to cut back and make sure that that video is now full screen, how you would do that is move your playhead to the very end of where your title card ends, and then you would want to split your clip. So I'm going to split this. Oh, I had the wrong thing selected. Make sure that whatever you're editing is actually the selected, the selected portion. So now I've just split that clip. So now I can go into my crop and rotate, and I can change the horizontal position back to where it was originally. So when I play this now, It's going to show my recipe card on the right-hand side. And then as soon as the recipe card disappears, it comes back to the full screen and shows the remainder of that clip without it being in a weird position on your screen. So any questions about that before we pull in? I see some questions coming in. If we had celebrate your plate recipe card, can we add that instead of typing in recipe? So if you, yes, Nancy, if that is like an image that you already have, you can actually add an image in here as well. So you would just pull that photo over top and add that as your recipe card. And actually it's, in my mind, it's almost easier to create your graphics outside of Premiere Rush than it is to try and create it in Premiere Rush. So if it were me and you had like a nice, especially if it was like branded with like the celebrate your plate, like what do we call it? We're not really allowed to call them logos, but your icon for celebrate your plate. If you had like a really nice recipe card with that, you would just pull that in as a photo. You could, you know, move it. You could crop and rotate just like how you can with your video clips or your title cards. It's artwork. Yes, Debbie. The celebrate your plate artwork. It's not a logo. You would just pull that in and it becomes really, really easy. Can we add text over the clip without the white background? Yes, absolutely, Jenny. Yep. So if you didn't want that, like that card to play, for example, you could just delete that. Now, I moved my video and stuff to accommodate for that card. So of course it looks bad right now, but you can absolutely just add text over top. Yeah, you can do a lot of different things here. Now, the other thing I want to show you, so let's say you have like the premise of your video created and now you want to add the OSU intro and outro, right? The CFAES intro and outro. I have these conveniently someplace in my.
While you look, I'll just also, when you're pulling in photos to a video, make sure they're pretty good resolution. They're gonna look bad next to a higher resolution video. So just check them when you've exported your video that they look how you want them to.
Yes, very, very good point there. Again, remember you're working with probably 1080. So if you have like a photo that you're pulling in that isn't that high of quality, you're gonna have some issues there. And I swear, guys, I put the CFA, yes, there it is, the intro and outro. I'm gonna grab this, I'm gonna just drag it and drop it. And I just threw that CFA, yes, it's the extension one. Actually, I think that they went in and added several additional video intros and outros because I see a 4H one now available on the brand website and an extension specific one also available on the brand website. So here's what the extension one looks like. Nice little intro, and then it cuts into my scene here. Now, let's say I want to add an audio clip. So I had an audio clip in my oranges folder. I'm going to drag and drop this in. I want the audio to start playing after the intro. So I don't want to start playing with the intro. This is where the audio adds. So it adds on the audio track, the first audio track. And if I play that, I'm not sure you're going to hear the sound because I did not share my screen with the sound, but let me just change that and see if we can make that happen. Let me know if you hear the sound come through. So we'll just sort of play this whole thing. Are you hearing the audio? Okay. Well, I'm hearing it and it's beautiful. I'm not sure why you are not hearing that. I'm not sure why you're not hearing that, but let me just show you very quickly how to, I'll try to export this and see how long this clip takes to export. And then I will try to show you like the whole clip, like as it exports. I'm going to get out of here. Notice how my audio clip is much larger than it needs to be. So all you have to do is hover over that. So it's highlighted orange, and then you just drag that and you can drag it to the end here. So it's going to end. I think there are probably ways, we don't have a ton of time left here this morning. So I think that there are ways that you can like make that audio fade out. I have not figured that out quickly. I looked for it this morning, but there's probably a way to make the audio fade. Let me just hover over and see if I can do like the right click. It's not showing. There's probably a way to make it fade out because right now it's just going to be like a hard stop, which probably isn't what we wanted. So I'm also going to, just to have this upon outro, I'm going to duplicate this extension branded clip, and I'm going to play that upon the outro. You could choose to play the music all the way through the end as well. So that's like super, super simple. Now let me show you how to export this. And let me see what questions we have in the chat first. We could see the level indicator. We believe you. Thank you, Sally. It was such a pretty audio track. So when I want to share this, I'm going to go to share. And in this case, I'm just going to export it to my computer. So right now it's going to save in my documents. I don't want it to save in my documents because that's kind of difficult to find. So I'm going to go and save it just to my desktop and then hit choose. And then I'm going to change the file name to, if I can, orange video, super creative. And then I'm going to hit export. Generally, videos can take a while to export. This is a pretty short video. So if you're doing anything that's like, you know, a lot of really, really large video files, or it's a really long video, like 10, 15 minutes, 60 minutes, it's going to take a lot longer to export. In this case, it's not going to take that long. Yeah, then I went and did a new share and shared my computer sound, but it's still not playing. One of the things that Rachel might mention in her session this afternoon, and maybe this is the issue, is when you're working in Premiere Pro, if the audio output is coming through your computer speakers and then you plug in your headphones, the audio output doesn't just automatically change to your headphones. You actually have to go into your Premiere settings and like change the settings so that you can hear the audio play through your headphones. It's kind of really obnoxious to be.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be what's going on here.
That's my guess.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop the share, and then I'm gonna try to open up this awesome orange video that we just created here this morning. And then I'm gonna share with computer sound, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this time. Let me know if you still can't hear the sound. All right, so that is the video that we just created with like super simple stock footage. It's not perfect. Like if I wanted to actually go in and make that perfect, you notice how that like audio clip kind of cut out. There was a really good place to actually have that audio cut out like 2 seconds before. So I would actually go in and play around so that that audio, like it was a really good like time transition there. So yeah, so that's like a very, very basic introduction to Premiere Pro. Ben asked, where did you make the white graphic again? So let's go back into, let me go ahead and share this. So the white graphic is actually in the titles. So if you open up your titles panel and then scroll way down, it's just a solid background is where you get that white card. And then, so it's basically 2 titles layered on top of each other. So I've layered a solid background, which is down here, and we can go in and create a new one very quickly. So I've layered a solid background here, and then I've layered on top of that a title, which allows me to then add, oh, I already did that, did I? Which then allows me to, again, I did it again. You wanna make sure that you're actually layering it on top and not changing the graphic. So because my text is white, you're not really seeing it. So let's go in and change it back to scarlet. There it is. And then again, if you want to move it, you just go to that crop and rotate panel with that card selected, and that's where you could move it to one side or the other. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my other, and then I could change my video so that it's on the other side, so you're seeing the full scope there. And it's pretty easy. So that's how you would add that title. We're going to play that. All right. Did that make sense, Ben? Did that help?
Danae, there's another question about how you provide attribution for the sound clip.
Oh yeah, great point. So Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know like at the end of the Studio 149 videos, you typically have like a credits slide that you would add.
Yeah, we will put it after the branding slide typically, where we put credits. We'll put anybody who worked on the video, anybody who maybe filmed, provided any footage. That way we're just making sure everyone gets credit for the work they've put in. And then if it's a song that requires attribution, I just put that text in that credit slide as well. And depending on which song you have from which website, it's going to ask you to provide attribution in different ways. So just make sure based on the source that you pulled it from that you're doing attribution in the way that they recommend.
Yeah, so I did just very quickly, I pulled in that solid background title card to the very end. You can pull this into your main timeline, so it doesn't have to be something that lives on top of something else, like B-roll footage would, and then you would just add a title card. The other thing you can do, as I mentioned, is you could create like your whole like outro slide or your credit slide in a program like PowerPoint, as long as you were keeping resolution in mind. Or you could do it in Photoshop, or you could do it in Canva. You would export that as a JPEG or PNG, and then you could just pull that title card into the very end of your entire program. So it kind of depends on you know where where you want to create it and what you feel is most easier. Any final questions here? This was, again, basic introduction to Premiere Rush. It's a great program for basic video editing. And don't hesitate to just go in there and play around. There should be some stock footage for you to go in and play around with if you don't have any that you can find easily. I went on to that website, pexels.com, this morning, and I searched fruit, and I found all of those great orange clips. Generally you can find some stuff like that. Like all of that was really wonderful because it was like 3 beautiful scenes of this mother and daughter eating fruit like in the kitchen. So it provided like the nice widescreen view here, like the kitchen view that we started with. And then it goes into a nice like, close-up scene of them peeling the orange. And then it's like sort of a medium scene where you can see their faces and you can see their hands working. That's what we talk about when Rachel talked about like the B-roll footage, the different angles, the variability. Those are the types of things that you're looking for when you're actually filming. But you can find a lot of really great stuff out there for free too. But do make sure that you aren't just grabbing video or photo or music without proper permissions. Make sure that you understand the licensing of those individual clips and that you know whether you have to provide attribution, whether you're allowed to modify. In some cases, you might not be allowed to modify it. Anything that's CC0, Creative Commons 0, you are allowed to modify, edit, and do stuff like that with. So with that, I will open it up for any questions. It's now 11:01, but we'll stick around for any questions that anybody has. Can't wait to get started. Yay. It is, Sally, and anybody else who has used Adobe Spark before, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised in Premiere Rush because you just have so much more capability. And it provides for a lot of more like creative freedom and creative flexibility. You might find that suffocating because you might just be like, I just want Spark back because it tells me like what to do, and it's very it's just very easy to use. But I think that you're going to be very pleasantly surprised with how simple Adobe Premiere Rush is. So Katie asked, can we caption for accessibility? So I would usually rely on the hosting platform for the caption. So if you upload this to YouTube, you will get automatic captions now. If you upload it to Facebook, you do have to go through and tell Facebook that you want that to be captioned. I would probably not recommend trying to do captions like in Premiere Rush because that's going to be you going in and adding like text, like slide by slide, and trying to time it and stuff is going to be a nightmare. So rely on the hosting platform where you're going to be posting this for your captions. At least that's my tip. When should we brand a video versus not, or should we brand everything? Yeah, so Sarah, that's a really great question. What we heard from John Rice, who presented on Monday, he's the team lead for video production for the college. He kind of said, I think when you're doing something that's a little bit more like formal and a little bit more polished, we're probably going to want to see that brand there. You saw how easy it was to just throw it on, right? You throw it on the front, you throw it on the back, it's a branded video. It's great. It takes 10 seconds to do. if you're like out in the field shooting something, like let's say you go to a farm visit and you see like a bunch of pest damage and you want to take a video clip of it and just post it really quickly and post it on something like Facebook. Generally, stuff doesn't have to be branded to go on Facebook, in part because it tends to be short-lived, right? That video clip is going to be relevant for that day or that week, and then it's going to go away and people aren't going to think about it again. For anything, like if you were going to do like a 5-minute instructional video on how to identify stink bugs in your whatever crop, and that you think that that video is going to have a sense of longevity to it, it's going to be more evergreen content that you can come back to year after year, take the few extra minutes to just brand it appropriately, because then it's probably going to live on YouTube. You're probably going to, upload it to Facebook. Hopefully it's going to be widely shared. Think about the shareability of things too. The general brand mindset, like the brand team mindset, is as long as it's being like published to a branded platform and like your Facebook page should be appropriately branded, then it's okay to not have to brand each individual piece of content. But think about when that content gets shared outside of your Facebook page that's branded and it gets shared onto another platform. That's when branding becomes a little bit more important, because now people are going to instantly recognize this as an OSU extension video, where otherwise they might not. So you do have to send it to the BAT, yes, before publishing, before disseminating. So that's generally best practice. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you so much for coming here this afternoon, this morning. I don't even know what time of day it is anymore. Thank you for being with us. We will be back at 1 p.m. with Rachel, who's going to lead a session on Premiere Pro. It might be a really good idea, even if you think that Premiere Pro is going to be like above your level, just come and listen, because you'll learn a lot, and then you'll understand the capability of Spark and Rush and Pro and decide what is going to be best for you. So thank you, and we hope to see you this afternoon.